No, you're not dreaming. Nottingham Forest are currently third in the Premier League, ahead of the likes of Manchester United, Chelsea, Tottenham, Villa, Arsenal, with only Liverpool and Manchester City ahead of them at this moment in time. But what makes this feat even more impressive is the fact that they finished 17th in the Premier League last season, only one place off the relegation zone. So how on earth has this happened? For me, this is all down to the brilliance of one man, and his name is Nuno Espírito Santo. But before we take a look at what Nuno has done to transform this Forest side this season, we first need to take a quick look back at last season. And the manager who was started off the season for Nottingham Forest last year was actually Steve Cooper before Nuno Espírito Santo took over, and he was a man who picked up the hot seat when Nottingham Forest weren't in a great position. He got the job in September 2021, and he took the club all the way from the bottom of the Championship all the way to the Premier League, and not only that, he kept them in the Premier League for the following season as well. But after a difficult start to last season where Cooper only picked up 14 points from 17 matches played, which is a points per game of 0.82, Mark Hernandez, the Nottingham Forest owner, decided that it was time to part ways and bring in some fresh blood. And that's when Nuno Espírito Santo first took over. And in hindsight, we can all say it was a genius move. But at the time, it was met with a little bit of speculation because this was a man who hadn't been in the Premier League for a couple of years. And the last job, he was failed at Tottenham and only lasted a couple of months. And the team's form did pick up a little bit with Nuno in charge, averaging 1.05 points per game compared to Cooper's 0.82. And they ended up getting 22 points in the remaining 21 games of the season, avoiding relegation despite a points penalty as well for breaching PSR rules. But how did Nuno set up Nottingham Forest last season? And last season, Nuno preferred to play his team with the back five. And you can maybe try and argue that it was trying to be a back three, but in reality, Nottingham Forest were defending really deeply in a low block, not exerting too much pressure, and it ended up being a back five at times, with wing-backs who could get up and down the pitch, two industrial midfielders like Ryan Yates, Danilo, sometimes it would also be Dominguez, and then two wider players who, in Morgan Gibbs-White, had a little bit of creativity, and Callum Hudson-Odoi, who had a little bit of pace to hit the target man, who was Chris Wood, who preferred over Taiwo Awoniyi. And you can maybe argue, yeah, it's boring defensive football, not really entertaining the fans. However, it did the job. He kept Nottingham Forest in the Premier League for another season, and there were actually some key moments last season where you could see the sparks of what Nuno was trying to do at Forest, and you could see the potential of what this Forest side could do, and which they have been showing this season. Let me show you. In terms of what sparks Nuno saw, we're going to work our way from the front and work our way back. And when it came to the centre forward position about who to go with, Taiwo Awoniyi or Chris Wood, he decided to go with Chris Wood. And I was always thinking to myself, why? Taiwo Awoniyi is the younger striker, he's got a great record in the Bundesliga, he's maybe the more modern day striker. But I think with this game against Newcastle United in December, really first took notice of Nottingham Forest under Nuno. And I think this is the game where it cemented for Nuno why Chris Wood was the man up front for him. First of all, the way this play starts out is Matt Turner kicking a ball long to the wing back, and you can see Chris Wood in the middle of the pitch, not really doing much. It's pretty calm for Newcastle at the moment. But the wing back wins the flick on, and then Anthony Elanga is away. And as you can see in the middle, Chris Wood, he is on his bike. He knows exactly what Anthony Elanga is going to do, and he knows exactly where he needs to be. So he's on his bike, he's sprinting towards that box. And this is when Fabian Schär takes a look to see where his man is. He looks over his left shoulder, sees Chris Wood, and realizes he's got a problem. He's on the back foot. Chris Wood is breaking his neck to get into the box, and if it wasn't for the fact that Anthony Elanga scuffs it, he could have had a goal here. And from this position, this ball should be going to Chris Wood. Like I said, Anthony Elanga scuffs it a little bit, and they don't score from it. But this is the first warning signs and the first signs of the movement of Chris Wood and why it's become so imperative that he starts up front for Nottingham Forest this season. And if you want another example of his intelligence and his movement off the ball, well, here's another one. Morgan Gibbs-White has got the ball on the counter-attack. He's making a run towards goal. You've got Callum Hudson-Odoi on the left, you've got Anthony Elanga on the right, and you've got Chris Wood in the middle there. And as Gibbs-White gets closer to the Newcastle box, you can see Chris Wood is looking over his left shoulder, constantly scanning, looking around him to see where his teammates are and where the space is. And as Gibbs-White is about to make his pass here, you can see Chris Wood is about to make a run behind the centre-back, which is Fabian Schär, in between him and Botman, and he's going to try and get the ball there. He doesn't get the ball as Gibbs-White decides to pass to Elanga, but that's alright, because as you can see, again, he's looking over his left, he's looking where is everyone going, but where is the space and where does that mean that I can be to score a goal. He pulls off Fabian Schär in that moment, and then he finds himself on the edge of the 6-yard box with a tap-in, open goal, and this is the one to make it 1-1 in this game, and Nottingham Forest are back into it. And that was an example of Chris Wood's movement off the ball. Now here's an example of him with the ball, and as you can see, Anthony Elanga is about to play the ball to Chris Wood in the wide area, and the ball is a little bit ahead of Wood and the defender, and so the defender thinks to himself, okay, it's quite easy, I just need to show Wood line and make sure that he doesn't cut back inside to the box. But that's exactly what Chris Wood does. He cuts inside somewhat unpredictably because you think he'd maybe try and hold up the ball and go wide with it and try and link up play with some of his wide men, but no, he decides to cut inside. But as you can see, Chris Wood, he realizes that, you know what, Newcastle are coming back on the defense, he's all on his own, and so he can't really take the shot on the inside. But again, because he's this centre forward, he's this lump, everyone expects him to not be that good with his feet. Everyone thinks maybe let him hold it up, take it to the corner and bring in some of his other players into the game. But no, he cuts back inside onto his left foot and then he decides to go on his own and try and chip 6'6" Nick Pope and get it into that far corner. And he does it. And he does it with so much ease and so much guile that is so unpredictable, and everyone is absolutely mesmerized, especially his former teammates who sold him to Nottingham Forest and they didn't think they had this in him. But yeah, not only off the ball, his movement on the ball as well is really, really good and very underrated. And taking that into account, it was clear for Nuno that his centre forward going into the season, and one of the reasons why Nottingham Forest done so well, is that they had to have that man, Chris Wood, up front. Someone who I have to say has been saving my fantasy football this year. 8 goals already, no assists, but he's already missed 6 big chances, so potentially he could have had even more. The second highest goal scorer in the Premier League, joined with Brian Mbeumo just behind Erling Haaland. He's been absolutely exceptional so far this season, but a key part of that is that Nottingham Forest has been playing to his strengths, not trying to make him into someone he's not meant to be, letting the 32-year-old who's had a very much a journeyman career just playing to his strengths, and he's the main target man, let him score the goals, and that's exactly what Nuno has done. But to facilitate Chris Wood having the best amount of chances and making sure that his movement is used most effectively, it's meant that he's needed the perfect amount of players around him. So, who did Nuno decide to go for? Last season, Nottingham Forest averaged 40.6% possession over the course of the season. That was 19th in the Premier League. Only Sheffield United had less of the ball. This season, it's 41.9%, an increase by 1.3%, which really isn't much, practically the same. And they're the 18th team who with the least amount of possession in the league, with only Everton and Ipswich who have the ball less. So clearly for Nuno and his side, possession doesn't mean much. It's about what they do with the ball. And what they do with the ball is about quick transitions, which we saw last season. It's about getting the ball to the wide men and then quickly to Chris Wood, who's going to score the goals. So we've talked about Chris Wood. He's got the ball, but it's about the wide players next to get him the ball, which is important. And we all know about the quality that Nottingham Forest have in wide areas. It is the likes of Callum Hudson-Odoi, Cho, and you got Anthony Elanga on the right as well. 2 players who were at Chelsea and Manchester United respectively. It didn't quite work out there from Callum Hudson-Odoi. Obviously had terrible injury issues. He's now seeming getting a bit fit. Anthony Elanga just wasn't favoured at Man United, wasn't deemed to be good enough. But at Nottingham Forest, they are players who have been given the game time and been given the time to prove how good they are. And I think with those two, and sometimes, you know, they can be injured, they can be inconsistent. So you also need depth in areas as well. So with the likes of Jota Silva, who signed from Liga Portugal, who ended up getting 15 goals and 7 assists last season for Guimaraes. He's ended up coming in and being able to back up both of them adequately as well, and also play for them sometimes when it's necessary. I think Nuno has got some incredibly talented wide players that can cause a lot of teams problems. And when you look at, you know, teams higher up in the table, do they have wingers who are better than Nottingham Forest? Probably, but is there much difference in the quality? Arguably, probably not. And honestly, while that's well and good, no good side can operate without a very good midfield. And I think in Nottingham Forest, they have several players who could fit into that midfield and do a really, really good job. And obviously, a key part of that is Morgan Gibbs-White, another player with another acronym in his name. But I could spend the whole video talking about him, and I really want to, but we all know how good Morgan Gibbs-White is for Nottingham Forest and how crucial he is as well. And now finally he's getting that recognition at international level as well with England, which is really good to see, and really good to see for all Nottingham Forest fans. But, you know, we know how good he is. The players who I think are just behind him in that deep line double pivot, the likes of Yates, the likes of Dominguez, the likes of James Ward-Prowse, the likes of Sangare, Danilo, they're all really, really good. And in these 5 players here, Nuno Espírito Santo has a lot of options, a lot of quality as well, which is something that's very, very underrated. Someone in James Ward-Prowse who could deliver an absolute worldie of a set piece, and with the size of this squad could absolutely come in useful. Someone who's very Premier League experienced with Southampton and West Ham. Someone with Danilo who unfortunately suffered a bit of a horror injury early on in the season, but when he comes back is an absolute gem in the side as well. Sangare, who he hasn't quite hit the ground running, but there is absolutely a very talented player in there. Someone who we all saw at PSV who could really have done better and gone to a big club than Nottingham Forest, no offence intended, but the fact that he's at Forest and he can really deliver as well if he finally gets the ground running. But for me, it's these two. It's Dominguez and Yates, two players who probably don't get the recognition they deserve. And Ryan Yates in particular for me, a player who was at Nottingham Forest in the Championship as well, has now come up to the Premier League and I think has done a really, really good job. Very underrated as well because of the fact that, maybe because he's English, maybe because his name's Ryan, he's 6 foot, he doesn't look the best on the ball. He's just someone who's going to go out there, give it his all. And I think someone who's very underrated. His defensive duties that he does in front of the Nottingham Forest backline is so crucial. And then someone like Dominguez who can make those box-to-box runs, can also help on defense and can also help on the attack is so crucial. But there is one addition to that midfield that has happened over the summer, which I think has had a transformative effect on the whole Nottingham Forest side, and that is, of course, of Elliot Anderson from Newcastle, because he's been absolutely crucial to the way Nottingham Forest have played so far this season. Look at defensive numbers, 99% out for blocks of all midfielders so far this season, 91st for clearances, 88 for aerials won, but not only that, going forward as well, if you look at 87% off for shock rating actions, 95% off for progressive carries, 98 for successful take-ons, 98 for touches, 95 for progressive passes. Honestly, these are numbers both attacking and defending which are really, really impressive and absolutely cannot be ignored as someone who has come into the Nottingham Forest. Maybe a bit of luck because of the whole PSR situation that was going when Newcastle with Vlachodimos going one way, Anderson going the other. But potentially a little bit of skill as well. What you want to put it down to, it's up to you guys. But for me, regardless, an acquisition that has just been absolutely mind-blowing. And the fact that, so many more clubs should have been looking at Anderson more than Nottingham Forest because these numbers prove that he is absolutely on his way to become a really, really good Premier League footballer. And so not only is it a great option if you wanted to play him alongside Yates or alongside Dominguez instead of one of the other two, but also at times when Mo Gibbs-White has been suspended so far this season, he's also playing in that number 10 position. But not only that, he's also played in the wide positions as well, and what he offers in terms of pressing and aggressiveness, that can also be translated to those wide areas as well. And so Anderson, again, while young, is a fantastic option to have as well. And so that brings us on to the defence of Nottingham Forest, which last season wasn't great. Last season, Nottingham Forest conceded 67 goals, which was the 5th worst in the entire league last year. But this season, we've seen a remarkable turnaround. In fact, they've only conceded 7 goals so far this season from 10 games, and they're the second best defensive side in the league, only better by Liverpool, who are top of the league. So what has been around this massive transformation? And we will of course come on to the actual defenders themselves, but I really want to give credit to Matt Sells, a player who was there last season, who Nuno signed in January from Strasbourg for £5.1 million reported fee. But it was someone who was part of that defence last season, so may not get the credit for the defence this season, but I really want to highlight just how impressive he has been so far. Now that Sells has had 6 months to get it customised to the Premier League, I really think that we're seeing the best of him. Of all the goalkeepers who've played so far this season, he is the second highest with a save percentage with an 82.4%. Only Alisson Becker at Liverpool, who hasn't even played all 10 games, has got a higher save percentage, and all the goalkeepers who have played 10 games, Sells is the highest. And this comes from the fact that he's conceded 7 goals from a post-shot expected XG of 8. So it really goes to highlight what an improvement he's made so far this season, and to the one he's made to the Nottingham Forest side as well. And like I said, because he was here last season, it might be going under the radar slightly just how impressive he has been, but I really wanted to highlight what a stark improvement I've seen him in just in 6 months. And one thing that has surprised me is we all know how great Nottingham Forest have been so far defensively, but what's changed from last season is they've gone from a back 5 to a back 4, and like I said, you could maybe argue the back 3, you're not convincing me, it was a back 5, Nottingham Forest was so deep. But why has it been a back 4 when he conceded so many goals last season, 67, 5th worst in the league? Why going to back 4 has improved your defence? Well, one of the big weaknesses the Nottingham Forest had last season was the fact that they conceded 22 goals from set pieces. 22. That is honestly just way too many. Even if they cut half of those, they'd be much higher up in the table last season than they were. So they really needed to sort out that. So how do you go about doing that though? Well, in my opinion, Murillo was one of Nottingham Forest's best defenders last season, and he started this season doing exactly that. I think defensively, he was very solid on the ground. I think he was reading of the play, his interceptions and his blocks were really, really impressive. But one thing that he doesn't quite have is that aerially he's not quite a presence. He only stands at 6 foot tall, and last season Nottingham Forest decided to play three at the back, including the likes of Bolly as well, to really help out that aerially. So this season, going into it, Nottingham Forest needed someone at this back who was aerially dominant, who's going to head away absolutely everything. His reading of the game was exceptional, and he was just going to put his body in line absolutely anywhere, just trying to prevent Nottingham Forest conceding so many set piece goals. And in comes Milenkovic from Fiorentina, who has come in and has been an absolute revelation. And honestly, I don't know how Forest managed to get him for only 12 million euros. They've absolutely stolen the rug under Fiorentina there. And he averages 4.2 aerial duels won per 90, and that is in the 99th percentile of all centre-backs in Europe's top 5 leagues. So he is an aerial duels monster. But not only that, he's in the 92nd percentile for touches in the attacking penalty area as well, with 1.56 per 90 on average, which means that not only is he great defensively in his own half, but he's also great at causing havoc in the opposition penalty box. And honestly, with Nikola Milenkovic being 27, Murillo just being 22, which is scary, and then having the experienced cells behind them, who's been a bit of a journeyman himself, and has now managed to find and do a really good job at Forest, I think that Nottingham Forest defence for at least a good couple of years are probably going to be in really good hands. But no team is quite finished without a good pair of fullbacks, and for Nottingham Forest that is no different whatsoever, as they have got Ola Arne at right back and then Alex Moreno at left back. And in those two fullbacks, what you have are two fullbacks who are defensively very, very solid and sound and can really help that Nottingham Forest defence try and keep all those clean sheets and be the second best defence in the league so far this season. But not only that, going forward, they're actually really, really handy, because Ola Arne, a player who can play on the wing as well, a little bit further forward as he has done in his career, and as well as Alex Moreno, who's got an impeccable delivery into the box. Both of them getting forward, being more advanced, getting involved in the play, receiving the ball high up the pitch, and then not only that, having the ability to beat their men and then put in a decent cross really aids and really works well in this Nottingham Forest side. And what you end up with Nuno Espírito Santo at the helm is a side who are currently third in the Premier League. And when you look at that side on paper, it's not the most flashiest 11, but it's a side that are very functional, work really, really well, and know their job. They're not trying to be anyone else. So they're not trying to be Pep Guardiola and playing tiki-taka at the back. They know what they're good at. They're going to defend really well, really compactly, and they're going to hit you in transition and not try and really keep the ball. Get it to the wide players, get it to Morgan Gibbs wide, and try and hit big Chris Wood up front, who has been an absolute revelation, as has this whole Nottingham Forest side. And whether they can keep it up or not, that's a different question. But at the moment, I'm deciding that I'm just really going to enjoy